Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Good evening. It's nice to be with you. I'm having a very nice, please be comfortable. Sit comfortably, yeah, relax. I'm having a very nice time in Singapore. I went walking on went by Henderson Wave Bridge there. Beautiful walkway through the trees, and then this afternoon I was at the bird sanctuary with my binoculars. So I'm impressed at how green Singapore is. There are lots of trees. Is that just water? You can just put that there. Yeah, you don't have to offer that. I'm from Canada, as you might know. So the nighttime temperature last night was -20. -20. And the high today was going to be -11. That's the high. So I like green. So today I've been invited to try to give some reflections, and the title of the talk was around mindfulness. But before that, one thing came up. I was talking to Meng Hao in the car, and how the difficulties he's facing in a very stressed out society, where there's a lot of retrenchment and a lot of worry about losing work, and what it got me to thinking about was the difference between insecurity and the teachings on anicca. So all of you are familiar with the teachings on impermanence. We talk about that all the time. And you'd think that impermanence is about insecurity, right? You'd think, well, if the Buddha is saying everything that arises ceases and is impermanence, well, then I'm really worried. I can really get frightened. But obviously the teaching isn't about that, because the teaching's about the end of suffering. So I was pondering that, like, insecurity is a reflection on change, isn't it? It's a kind of consideration. Wow, I might lose my job. I might get cancer. I might be in a car accident. My kids might flunk school and might not get a job, and that's a kind of sense of uncertainty, but that's driven not by wisdom, but that's driven by fear, right? So the feeling of fear is different than a reflection on change. Feeling of fear is an emotional feeling that we all have, and when fear then is driven by cultural challenges such as loss of job, loss of position, or it's driven by ill health, things like that, then that fear goes into insecurity, into anxiety, and such like. As the contemplation of change is a very sober kind of consideration. It's a observing of life as it flows through consciousness, as it arises and ceases, as it appears and disappears in consciousness. And that kind of very sober, attentive observation of life is based upon wisdom. Attachment to fear and thinking thoughts of anxiety and thinking thoughts about insecurity is something that's driven by thought, not by observation. And because we live in a world which is unreliable, and because the future is unknown, and because we have to pay for our house and we have to get the kids educated and so on and so forth, the possibility of failure is always there, isn't it? It's always very, very there. And then if the economy is difficult, and if the price of oil is going down and you're a rubber manufacturer or you're a petroleum all of that, then the pressures are great. The stress is great, no doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I, as a monk, can sit here and say, oh, well, let go, but I don't have to pay for the mortgage. You feed me, in fact, right? I don't have to worry about that. So it's very easy for someone in my position to say, oh, don't worry, just let go, it'll be okay. But life isn't that way. It's a very, very challenging situation. So without being dismissive of that, to realize that living in a world which is insecure, can I find any kind of place in my own mind which is peaceful with insecurity, rather than thinking that I can get permanent security, and yet trying to develop lifestyles, professions, social situations where I can have some security. Because if I can have some security, then I can contemplate better. So on a worldly basis, on a basis of just conventional reality, we'll always try to be secure, won't we? We're always try to have a secure job and have good health care and have good education and have good political policies which gives us security and stability. That's a natural kind of thing to do, and not to do it would be foolish. And that we call the conventions of life. The conventions of life are based on dana and sila, on morality, on social responsibility, on good planning. Like Singapore is amazing, isn't it? What you've done in a little island, survived with all these big countries around you, that's really quite impressive, And that's the work of intelligence, of intelligent planning, and just being smart, being street smart. And those we call the worldly dharmas of social stability. And to dismiss that would be foolish, right? Dismiss that. So the way I like to think about the practices of Buddhism, I like to kind of think about it in two ways. One is the social aspect of my life, and one is the inner workings of my mind and body. So in the social aspect of my life is that I'm a monk, and I'm in a monastery, and I have my responsibilities, and I have a 67-year-old body that I need to take care of, and I travel and all the rest of it. That's the conventional reality that I live by, and I try to do that well. So I try to be diligent in coming to morning meditation. I try to know the chanting. When it's time to do building work, I try to participate in the building work. I try to learn things to be more skillful. I try to read so that I'm more informed. And I have a social life, and same with you. You go to work, and you have your kids, you try to educate them, you try to train so that you're more skillful in whatever profession you have. You observe the civil code, the legal code, you try to live by the 5 precepts. These are the conventions we live by. And to do them well is very important. To do them well is very important because they give stability to our social life as much as possible. Not absolute, but they give stability to our social life. And that stability then is a basis for contemplation, or for observing consciousness, observing our life from an inner perspective. And that's the second kind of reality I like to, and Buddhism likes to think about, is that not only can I participate in a social life, in my social responsibilities, but also I can observe my inner life, can't I? I can observe my thoughts and feelings, I can observe my emotions, I can observe my reactions, I can look at the way I respond in certain situations. So I have this flow of inner experiences which I can be aware of too. So I can be at a committee meeting, as I was saying this afternoon, and I can be trying to present something to the board members of the committee, right, and try to do it well, and try to have all my notes there and so on. And also I can observe that I'm getting nervous, or I'm getting uptight, or I'm not liking what this person is saying, or I'm getting bored with a committee meeting. I can do both, right? And if I didn't do both, I wouldn't really have a full life. If I didn't do the inner work, I wouldn't have a spiritual life. And if I didn't do the outer work, my life would be a mess. So both are very, very important. And in the Sangha life, we would call that Dhamma Vinaya. So Vinaya, for a monk, is the social life that I live by. And that Dhamma is understanding the way things are, and specifically why I suffer, and the end of suffering. And so you have a different Dhamma, you have a different Vinaya, but you have the same Dhamma. You suffer like I suffer. Lay people suffer the suffer of lay people, and monks suffer the suffering of monks. And if you think monks don't suffer, forget it. We're in the same boat as you, right? And like Lompa Cha used to say, old people suffer the suffering of old people, adolescents suffer the suffering of adolescents. Mothers suffer the suffering of mothers, fathers suffer the suffering of... It's different kind of suffering, but it's still suffering, you know? And so we're the same in that way. Our Vinaya is different. So definitely, your social structures are different than my structures. Good social structures are based on morality. You know, they're based on good ethics. They're based on generous living, on compassionate living. So monastic life is based upon that, and hopefully your life is based upon that too. But the challenges you face are much more complex than the challenges I face. You know, because lay life is very complex. It's very, very complex. Your life is dependent on in the price of oil or the Saudis producing oil. It's weird, isn't it? You know, some character with a piece of cloth over his head in another country decides, well, we're going to pump out more oil, and it threatens your job. You know, that's a lot of pressure which is out of your control, really out of your control. So going back to insecurity, you think about that. Wow, life is really insecure. It's really unstable. It's really uncertain, and I'm afraid. Now that is not the contemplation that the Buddha suggested. He didn't suggest to look at life as an insecure situation and then become fearful of it. No. He said, find another refuge. Don't use conventional life as your refuge, and yet live it well. Do the best you can. So that without dismissing conventional life, without like saying, I'm not going to participate in life, you actually participate very, very well, the best you can. Be as successful as you can, do the best you can. But then find a different kind of refuge. Find a refuge in your heart which can be within stability. And that's the contemplation of change. When I feel fear, when I feel anxiety, when I feel stressed, it has a certain kind of physical component and a certain kind of mental component. So physically, I feel if I have fear, it's in my guts, it's in my heart, in thinking mind, it's in the way I think. Anxious thoughts are different than angry thoughts, aren't they? Anxious thoughts and anxious bodily feelings are different than lustful bodily feelings or lustful thoughts. It's different. So there's a character to fear. There's a certain structure and a certain color and a certain way that fear can be observed. And the thing about fear is that it is an object of mind. It's an object that appears in consciousness, both physically, mentally, emotionally, in its various ways. It appears. It's an object. Just as that curtain, I can notice that curtain. That's a greenish curtain for my visual perception. And that's a clock. I can observe it as an object. Same way with the emotions. They can be known as an object. Right? Now when I don't know them as an object, and when I become the subject, that we call attachment, and that's a disaster, isn't it? So not only can I feel fearful, I can be lost in fearful thoughts. I can worry. I can stress out with anxiety. And the more the culture turns its screws on me, the more I'm affected. So if everyone in the office is worried about losing the job, man, I've really got something to be afraid of. It's true. You know, and everyone in the office at the cooler is saying, yeah, 50% of us are going to lose our jobs. That even makes more stress and more fearful. Well, but you can still know it as an object. I can still be aware that, there is fear. Right? There is fear. Fear has arisen. It is an experience in consciousness, in awareness. And when I become the witness or observer of that, I begin to have some space and freedom, don't I? When I'm simply the subject of that, I have no space. I'm simply dominated or victimized or kidnapped by these emotional states that I have. If I just try to get rid of them and say, no, I don't really feel fear, or I just distract them with drugs and alcohol or whatever you want, that's not the solution either. Running away is not the solution. So what's the middle way, or what's the way, is to awaken to the feeling of fear as something which is changing. And that we call wisdom. To awaken to the feeling of fear as something that is changing, as an object in mind. It's an object that has arisen. Huh? It's hard to do because it's so quick and so fast and so real. It seems so very real. So our training in the contemplative life, and Buddhism isn't just a meditative life or just a moral life, it's also a contemplative life. And contemplation, I would look at that. Contemplation is the capacity to witness to my inner world. It's a capacity, an intelligent, wise capacity to know, oh, fear has arisen, and it feels this way now. It affects my stomach. It's driving my thoughts right now. Fear feels this way. And that's always the first step of mindfulness, isn't it? The first step of mindfulness is to awaken to the way things are. Awakening to the way things are is not judging them or wishing they go away. That's desire. Desire says, oh, I don't want fear. I want to be secure. Sure, we all do. That's natural. But no, right now there is fear, there is insecurity, there is worry in my mind, in consciousness, and maybe in my society. So the first step is always this sense of awakening or witnessing to the whole of my experience, not just my social experience, but the way I'm interpreting life, the way I'm perceiving life, the way my mind is reacting to life. And I can do that. That I can do. If I say to you, don't be afraid tomorrow, you can't do that. Someone will press your fear button and you'll be afraid. Or if like I was saying this afternoon, okay, you're going to be afraid at 4:15 tomorrow. Life doesn't work that way, does it? Fear arises according to causes and conditions, and according to the causes and conditions in my own conditioned mind, and to the buttons that get pressed by external factors. So fear is not who you are, right? Fear is a condition that arises through your particular karmic formation when the causes and conditions are there. And then when the causes and conditions change, the fear changes. And when there are no causes and conditions for fear, then the fear ceases, right? So you can't really say it's you. You can say, I am experiencing fear. Sure, yeah, you can say it, so it's very personal in that sense, but that's not who you are. If that was who you are, then you could say, I'm not going to have fear. No thanks. Or you could say at 4:15 I'll have more fear or less fear. But life doesn't work that way. Fear arises more like weather, doesn't it? Right? It's like it's something that is actually it's just the same as weather. It's just kind of a bit close to you. But what's the difference between fog rolling into Singapore and the fog of fear rolling into your mind? The difference is the fog of your mind and fear is much more painful, much more difficult. But doesn't it arise in the same kind of way, in a natural kind of way? Is fear unnatural? No, it's natural, isn't it? It's not your fault you feel fear or anger or lust. They're just natural conditions. They're natural conditions. So to me it seems the contemplative life is understanding nature and then finding freedom within the flow of nature. Right? So you get a flow of weather, you get a flow of experiences, but you get a flow of inner interpretations and emotions. There's a flow there that comes and goes, it comes and goes. So is freedom one where I never have fear, where I never have anger, or I never feel lust, or I love you all the time? Is that freedom? Or is that even possible? It's not possible, right? So whereas maybe freedom is in observing change. Now, why it's difficult to observe change is because of desire. I like security. I like harmony. I like physical comfort. And I like coffee. I dislike insecurity. I dislike physical discomfort. And I don't like spinach. Right? Different things. So if my freedom is dependent on the things I like and dislike, how can I ever be free? There's no way. And so the Buddha focuses on desire. He doesn't say that desire is wrong, but believing in desire and always following the dictates of desire is a losing game. Because it always takes you to disappointment. Because it changes. But if you then take a different kind of stance, and you say, well, the freedom of the mind lies in knowing change, how things arise and cease. What you focus on, you're no longer focusing on the objects. Desire focuses on objects. I like this, I don't like that. Desire tries to maximize pleasure, minimize pain. I want more of this, I want less of that, right? So desire is always the energy which is focused on objects, on emotions, on bodily feelings, on gadgets, on perceptions, on relationships, on family, and all the rest of it, on art, on aesthetics. Desire wants life a certain way and doesn't want life the other way. Reflection on change is not focusing on the objects, it's focusing on the knowing, on the awareness of objects. So whatever you're feeling, if your emphasis is on anicca sanya, on the perception of change, what are you doing? You're actually encouraging awareness in the present moment of the way things are. So the emphasis now is on awareness rather than on the objects of awareness. You see what I mean? Right? Now, if you do that with fear, or the strong emotions that we have, that's hard to do. You have to be very patient. But if you do that with fear, and you get good at it, then fear no longer dominates, but the awareness of fear dominates. Fear no longer dominates, but the awareness of change dominates. And that's where you find your freedom. Two things happen. The tendencies towards fear begin less powerful because you are no longer attaching to fear. You're no longer engaging with fear in a heedless way, in an egotistical way. You know fear now as weather. It's just weather. It's terrible weather, yeah. It's a hurricane, yeah. It's a cyclone, yeah, but it's just weather. And there's the awareness. And notice the awareness is not weather. The awareness doesn't have rain or snow. The awareness knows rain and snow, right? The awareness is like stainless steel. It doesn't rust. Objects are rusting all the time. Good, bad, good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. That's rust, huh? But awareness is very interesting. But our desire minds are always interested in objects, emotions and relationships and food and things like that, which is not wrong. It's just limited. It's limited. So the reflection on change then, on anicca sanya, takes you back to the knowing of the way things are, awareness of the way things are. And that's where you find your freedom. Now, any experience has the potential to be known as something that's changing, right? You can do that with a horrible experience or a beautiful experience. You can lose your job or you can get double the pay tomorrow. I wish you double the pay, I mean, I hope it works for you. But if you don't, you can still be aware of change. So awareness of change is a refuge. That's where you can find your real peace. So the Buddha's reflection on change wasn't to make you more anxious, right? It was just don't go to the casino and put all your money on that horse. Because that horse called objects is not going to be a winner for you. You're going to lose. So, put your money on the thing which is truly a refuge, and that's awareness of change. You see, so what we're doing is we're not denying the objective world in any kind of way, rejecting it. We're still living our lives the best we can, but we're beginning to relate to it through anicca, through change. So Ajahn Chah's teaching was always around life is uncertain. Not to make me anxious, but to make me find a refuge which is certain. And the awareness of uncertainty is certain. Do you see the irony? Like let's say I had one very interesting kind of encounter with Luang Por Chah. We were in England, and we were in the Hampstead Vihara, and we were about to move to Chithurst Monastery. And we were going to invite this more kind of elderly man who was a good gardener to come and help us with the gardens there. And I kind of had my doubts about this fellow. He's a bit of a case. I don't know. And Ajahn Chah had met him and talked with him. And I went to Ajahn Chah and I said, so what do you think of this man? And I thought, okay, the master will tell me. He can see into everyone's mind, you know. He'll tell me exactly, and I'll know who this guy is. You know what he said to me? It's uncertain. I said, oh, yeah. And that was such a good lesson, because it is uncertain. Who is, is there any permanent kind of, like, you should look at your own personality. Is it permanent? Are you always happy? You're always, no, you're a very uncertain person. And that everyone gets upset because you are uncertain. But that was a really good lesson, because he was showing me that my perceptions of people are simply constructs conditioned by, a few meetings in my culture, whatever, but they're uncertain. And he said, look at that. That doesn't mean that you can't have perceptions about people. That's fine. You can make judgments about people, but it's uncertain, which made me actually much more aware of this person. If I had taken a position, well, he's this, and that, which I had actually, I was certain, then I would no longer be looking at him. I'd be looking at my perceptions, my judgments, and then I'd lose true communication. So not to deny, we need to make judgments about things, but that was a really good lesson. It's uncertain. And then I remain more open to the person. And I was right, most of it. But it's actually quite a good lesson in Dhamma, that this is uncertain. So his reflection on uncertainty wasn't making me anxious. It was just showing me, no, your refuge is in awareness, not in your confident opinions about people and your judgments and all of that. It's in awareness. Huh? So what about the title of this talk? Where is that going to fit in here? Well, what I've found is in it seems to me the goal of Buddhism is awareness of the way things are. Morality is not the goal. Morality is the method. If I make morality the goal, right, and I try to be a perfect person, I'll just get uptight, because I'll never be perfect. But if I make morality a method to make me more mindful, right? So let's say with speech, I want to hurt someone with speech, and I try to practice the precept around right speech, and and I'm struggling with it. I want to tell them off, and the precept says, "No, you be kind, be patient." I want to tell them off. No, be kind, be patient. At least I'm more mindful, right? So the precept or the moral precept helps me to be more mindful. So I would think, for me, the way I look at it is that sila is the method, and the goal is awareness. Dana. Seems to me, if the goal was dana, right? I mean, sometimes I don't feel generous. I'm sorry. Sometimes I'm bloody-minded, and I say, leave me alone, and I'm not going to share my cake with you. Just leave me alone. It happens. You're not always generous. You can't always be generous. So if the goal was generosity, what do I do when I'm not generous? I feel guilty, right? And someone else makes me feel guilty. You should be more generous. Oh, get off my back. But if I see that a generous heart makes me more free, when I can share my cake with you, when I can share my life with you, I actually need less for myself. I can be more mindful. I can be more aware. So generosity is the method, not the goal. The goal is awareness. Meditation objects. If the goal is some kind of meditation object, which I just get absorbed into, then I'm just absorbed in an object. I'm like a horse in a stall. I'm looking at this object. Maybe I'm peaceful, but I'm just kind of caught in this object. So is that the goal? Or maybe the goal is to be, if the goal is to be aware, then the object helps me to be aware. So I take an object of meditation to stabilize my mind, but the object is not what's important. It's the stability of awareness. Yeah? So the goal is awareness. Or panya, is the goal some kind of insight that I haven't got yet? Like, is it something I have to get tomorrow? And I'm going to get something out there, like when I really meditate and do 26 hours without moving? But that's time, and time is self, and time is ego. But the Dhamma is always here and now. It's unconditioned. So it seems to me the goal of panya is awareness. The goal of anicca sanya, the goal of perception of change, is not to give you some fabulous experience, but to bring you back to awareness. When I know anxiety as a condition which has arisen and stayed for a while and ceases, that makes me more aware. So if you look at that, what do you see? How do you look at it? What's the method? What's the goal? Compassion. Is the compassion the goal, or is it the method? It's just a way of thinking. You can think other ways if you want. It's a way of thinking. If compassion is the goal, again, the compassion is the goal. What do I do when I'm angry? I feel guilty. I shouldn't be angry. I should do more metta. May you be well. May you be well. Actually, I don't like you. That doesn't work that way, right? But if metta is the method, if karuna is the method, if mudita is the method, if upekkha is the method, I can see when I have a chance to develop those, it helps me with anger. It helps me with cruelty. It helps me with just getting upset. So the more I do that, the more aware I am, the more mindful I am. So compassion is the method. I remember listening to a talk His Holiness Dalai Lama gave in New Zealand, and I remember him saying that. He said, in Tibetan Buddhism, compassion is the method. And I never thought of that. I thought, no, it's a goal, isn't it? Shouldn't I just be like infinite compassion to everyone all the time? Which got me really depressed because I couldn't do it. Right? I can't. I'm just human. Right? And then he said, no, it's the method. And that was such a good insight. It's the method. Yeah. Sometimes I can't do it, but a lot of times I can. And the more I do it, the more mindful I am of cruelty, of anger, and the more the cruelty and anger dissipates and falls away. Right? So this is a kind of way to kind of consider for me. So the title of the talk. Am I ever going to get there? How can I sustain awareness then? If that's the question, maybe that's rather than get something else, how can I sustain awareness for long periods of time? Well, one of the ways I've been suggesting as I've been talking here in Singapore is that one question you can ask yourself constantly is, am I aware? You can never run out of fuel on that one. You can ask it 100 times a day. It's a great question. Because when you ask yourself that question, am I aware? You can't really think about it. You can only be aware. It's a beautiful question. Right? Am I aware? And you're at the committee meeting, you're driving your car, am I aware? And if you start asking, what does it mean? Am I aware? Am I aware? I don't know. How do I know if I'm aware? You don't. You don't go there, do you? You just know you're aware. Am I aware? Simple question. And something you can ask for the rest of your life. And then when you get that, when I am aware, when you feel that, what does that feel like? For me, 2 words come up. Watchful, available. Finally, the title of the talk. So watchful is an interesting word, isn't it? Watchful. But also available. Because quite often in Buddhist practice, when we become watchful, we become controlling. Or when we become watchful, we want to get a result. We read about attainments and wonderful things that wonderful people attain, and we think, yeah, I'd like 2 of those, please. And we start to look for something. As soon as we look for something, we're no longer available. Right? And that's insidious in Buddhism. You read a book, you hear a teacher, and he talks about these wonderful states of mind, and you think, yeah, I really want that. I don't, and I don't want this terrible state of mind I have. So I start to look for something. I'm watchful, but I'm not available. Availability is, I find it a really fascinating word that, and it's also an interesting reflection on how to use language. You can use language as opinion. Mindfulness means this, and Second Noble Truth is this. So you have intellectual structures and opinions, but using language to help you awaken to the way things are is a very interesting use of language, very creative use of language. So these are 2 words I use a lot. Watchful, available. Now available is a kind of receptive quality to the mind. I'm available. Whatever. Pain, I'm available. Horror, fine. Happiness, fine. Harmony, fine. I'm available. So when do I become unavailable? And you got to switch it around. When I become unavailable, I say, oh, I'm worried. My mind's just caught up in worrying, or I'm resenting something that happened to me, or I'm fantasizing about a future unavailable. So then, rather than berate myself and say, come on, you should practice more and try more and control more, no, watchful available. You just come back. Am I aware? So you're returning to the goal all the time, rather than goal being so far away from you that 10,000 lifetimes, right? Maybe I'll be reborn as a dog next lifetime because I didn't wash the toilet or something like that. Horrible. And you get caught up in all these ideas of rebirth and becoming. And that's all self. That's all ego, and you're no longer available. But watchful and available is always like here and now, not a matter of time. You don't have to have a certain mindset to do that. You can do it all the time. You have to do it all the time. And you begin to see that the goal of Buddhism is sustained, watchful, available. Sustained awareness. And the way you do that, in many ways, is you look at the three characteristics. You observe life as a changing thing. You emphasize awareness rather than the object of awareness. Desire is always emphasizing the object of awareness, but the reflection on change is emphasizing the awareness itself. Another thing I like to do, I say this room is taking place in awareness. Try this one, okay. I'm sitting here, you're sitting there. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me. That's one way of looking at it, true. Another way of looking at this whole scenario of looking, depth perception, color, sound is happening in awareness. In awareness. It's a perception. I play around with that one too. I like that. So the sense of me being here is in awareness. I'm not saying that I'm over there, but just a sense of a me being a here and a you being a there is in awareness. So what you begin to do is you begin to make awareness or perceive awareness as something which contains the comings and goings of conscious experience. So the sense of a self arises and ceases in awareness. The sense of the future anxiety arises and ceases in awareness. Your personal history. I was born 67 years ago, that thought of a person in history arises and ceases in awareness. And you begin to perceive awareness as limitless, unbounded, not bounded. Now that's not a belief, right? I'm not making some kind of statement, quantum physics kind of statement, right? That's not, I'm just using perception now to maybe create a different way of looking at life which frees me from the attachment to self, to personal history, to cultural history, to all the ways that my mind loses availability, loses watchfulness. And these are not beyond any of us, really. They're not so complicated. It's just that we forget. We're good people. We try hard, but the power of forgetfulness is also very, very strong, right? It's very, very strong. And so rather than berate ourselves for not being mindful all the time, I would always encourage everyone, no, just keep doing it. Just keep waking up. Why am I aware? Trust in that. Trust in awareness. Don't worry about the conditions. Worry about your mortgage, okay, yeah. you take care of your kids and so on, but in a spiritual way, trust in the awareness rather than trusting in the emotions, rather than trusting in the bodily feelings. Trust in the awareness of change. And that, to me, is the only reasonable way of liberation. I don't see any other way of doing it. If liberation is something in time that I'm going to get later on, then I'm already deluded into being a self, moving through time to some objective reality which I don't know about and someone's told me about, and then I will be happy, and then I will be enlightened. No. That's still avijja, that's still time, that's still self, it's still sakkaya ditthi, it's still personality view. But in the moment, this is the way it is now, watchful, available. I suggest trusting in that, seeing how that works. Okay, I think I managed to get that title into the talk. Always a challenge. So maybe we could open it to any questions that anyone might have.
Brothers and sisters, now the floor is open for question and answer. If you have any question regarding your practice or Viradhammo, don't ask for 4D, so you can raise your hand.
Hi, Lompo. Very good evening to you. My question is a bit about being watchful also, but I've been doing a lot of research into the market. I think you know a bit about the oil and all that, and I've been looking into a lot of companies. So my research will tell me one thing, but my fear will take the better of me. And sometimes this hesitation actually causes me to lose different opportunities. So how do I actually look at it objectively without the emotional part? Or must I actually have the emotional part to be able to see it better? Yeah.
Probably experience, I'd say, no? How old are you?
24,
Yeah.
25, yeah.
20 years, right? A lot of that's just experience. You know, I can't say how you're made up, because some people are very intuitive, but some people are very naive. And they're naive and their intuitions are actually really stupid. But some people are intuitive and wise, and you know, they know how to do it. So it's hard for me to say what it would be. So I on a world, you know, like the worldly training that you do as a person in the marketplace, as it were, those are skills you have to keep honing. And I think one of the ways to do that is to be able to talk to someone who disagrees with you. Because you always talk to the guys that agree with you. There's a lovely, Barbara Tuchman is an American historian. She wrote some really, really good history books. She's died, but she talks about wars and the starting of wars and Bismarck and people like that. And she has this lovely phrase, which is the conceit of a happy plan. Think about it. I'm going to start a war. I'm going to win the war. Hitler, you know. She talks about really awful people. And we're going to win the war. The conceit of a happy plan. So in normal life, when you have a plan and you're getting off on it, it's inspiration. Yeah, man, this is really going to score. I'm going to really do well. And then you're not going to want to talk to the guy that says, actually, I think it's a bummer. You're going to talk to the other guy who agrees with you and says, let's go for it, man. So, sure, talk to the guy that boosts you up, but also talk to the person that pokes a hole in your argument. And if you can do that, I think emotionally you're a stronger person, right? And also it tests the assumptions that you made. So being able in life to be able to take feedback without being defensive, without being egotistical, is a way of growing those communication skills, I think. All right? And if that doesn't work, shave your head.
Thank you. A continuation on from that question. What if you actually talk to people who are actually naysayers? So I actually watch both points of the view, and I watch my mind at the same time. And then sometimes it's a bit hard to pick out whether or not am I being defensive, or let's say I have facts on my side, but is this facts interpreted by me because of the 5 aggregates we have our own perception. We see things the way we want them to see. So I do not know whether or not am I objective or am I seeing things the way that they are.
Probably both. You know, life's never, one way or the other. But I think experience is unfortunately, you just got to get burnt in life. It's not going to be hunky-dory for 24 years. So like taking the hits of life and learning, okay, so why? Why did I go off? Was it my judgment? Or was it just circumstances? Huh? And you got to keep trying. You just got to keep trying. So whether it's meditation objects or being in the work world, it's more about self-learning. But the more you can come from a cool place, a place of non-greed and non-fear, the better chance you're going to have to make a decision. Take like marriage. Not that I've ever been married, but that when if a person is very lonely, right, and then they see someone, and they perceive them as the person that's going to eradicate their loneliness, right? They are not looking at that person. They're actually looking at their loneliness, but they don't realize it, right? And then they have a relationship, and then they say, well, you're not really helpful. It's blame, right? And that's a person functioning from a mindset which they don't understand. So the more you're aware of that inner world, there'll always be doubt, right? But the more honest you are with that, and you look at greed and things like that, and you're content with small gains rather than huge gains and things like that, then I think your decisions will be a constant learning experience. But it's hard to quantify that, in an indefinite way. Good luck.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Monasteries in Canada. Any others?
Could you please explain a bit more about either the difference or the similarity between contemplation and meditation?
The way I use the word, and it's just words, but there's something in me which likes to train to calm and stabilize the mind. It might be the breath, it might be metta bhavana, and those exercises of stabilizing the mind, I call in my own vocabulary meditation. Okay? And then contemplation is my capacity to observe life in its cause and effect movement and pick up a theme from Buddhism like Four Noble Truths or dependent origination and try to look at life through those lenses. So the Buddha gives me a certain perspective to observe life through. And by observing life through that perspective, then I can gain the insights that he had. And that to me is contemplation. So typically, if I'm getting uptight about something, and I look and I say, what's the suffering, Viradhammo? What's the problem? And I look at that, and I see, I want this person to be other than they are. I just have to let go. Then that for me is contemplation. So it's not just thinking. It's not, I have an intellectual background in Buddhist ideas, right? And then that intellectual background gives me an avenue or an avenue of approach from daily life experience. So the meditation, the ability to stabilize the mind, helps in the contemplation. The contemplation is engaged in the meditation too, because in any kind of meditation I also contemplate, why am I getting sleepy? What is it with this object that puts me to sleep? Or what's with restlessness? So I have to understand how to meditate too. So contemplation is what we call panya, or wisdom, right? And wisdom, I would say, is not a fixed factor, it's a dynamic factor. Because wisdom is the capacity to see, when I do this, I get that result. When I do this, I get another result. It's a dynamic force in life, in the mind, which isn't just an opinion. It sees cause and effect. And so for me, Buddhism is a continual contemplation of life. Continual contemplation of depending on the theme. So like a theme I like is the unconditioned. And so I use that theme. Well, what's unconditioned in this experience? Or what's conditioned? So I use the language of Buddhism to actually observe and then try to take me on. But it's not just abstract reflection. I remember a lady once in Wellington, she came to me and she said, does Buddhism prove or disprove Darwinian theory of evolution? I said, what? what's this about? So you can ask any question you want, but it's not going to lead to liberation. So basically you want to ask the questions that the Buddha asks, because he puts those questions to us, because he says those are the ones that are going to liberate you. So as one lives one's life and engages in the normal things of life, it seems to me this kind of second level of consciousness, the second level of knowing yourself, needs to be engaged all the time. Huh? Otherwise, the teaching remains a kind of opinion. Like, let's just say, like, the teachings on anicca. How many times have you heard that? 6 million? Right? How many times have we all heard that? But yet, do we apply it minute by minute? And it's applying it minute by minute, which is the contemplative side. The intellectual understanding of it doesn't take that long. It's not rocket science. But the application, moment by moment, is a kind of what they call lakkhana samadhi. It's a samadhi based on the characteristic of change. And that kind of focus is different than a cultural belief. As a Buddhist culture, we all, we hear that anicca thing so often. We say, oh yeah, it's changing. But you think the Buddha was just kind of thinking, oh yeah, the weather's changing. It doesn't take a Buddha to know that. Night changes into day. Yeah, okay. That's not enlightenment. That's just common knowledge. But the application of that, moment by moment, takes a certain kind of focus. And it's that sustained focus on anicca, which is contemplation. And in other teachings too. Yeah? You look quizzical. What's going on?
What I've learned about meditation was that you're supposed to just sit down and not think. Well, I know thinking is not contemplation, but also not really contemplate either. Just sit and empty your mind and just either follow your breath or watch your sensations.
Yeah, that I call stabilizing the mind. Yeah.
Oh.
But there's more to Buddhism than stabilizing your mind. It's much more interesting than that.
So that's just the part one.
That's part of the method.
Or just the beginning.
No, it's an important part of the method. And it's not just the beginning, it's a constant thing you do. So Sammasamadhi is a constant thing, just as Samavajja is a constant thing. Right speech is a constant thing, right effort's a constant thing. So basically you want to figure out how to stabilize the mind. And instability is like the hindrances, dullness, restlessness, anger, those kinds of things. But once you stabilize your mind, you want to have enough power in the mind, focus in the mind, to contemplate the deeper teachings, like the unconditioned, the uncreated, those kinds of things. Yeah? So contemplation isn't just thinking. I might put one thought in there. Like I might put the thought, available. But then that my noticing of how I get attached to things is not through thought. The noticing is through silence. The noticing is through silence rather than through thought. The thought is the suggestion of what I might observe. But the observation itself is very silent. Like one word I use in my own meditation, I say, non-becoming. I pop it in. I put 2 words. I put in non-resistance, boing, and non-becoming. Now they become mirrors or bookends to how I'm meditating. So if I'm meditating to get a result, non-becoming shows me, oh, there's this tension. I notice that not through thinking, but through silent observation of the way things are. If I have physical pain and discomfort, and I put in non-resistance, I put that word in, I see, oh, I'm struggling with the pain. But I notice that struggle in silence. The word suggests what I can look at, but the observation itself is silent. Huh? See what I mean? And for that, you need stability of mind. If your mind's off with the fairies all the time, okay, you gotta, come on, back to earth, get in the present. Let's get serious here. All right?
Hello. Yes. Yeah, you can take a drink first. Yeah, just like alerting you to my.
I can do 2 things at once. Please, you go ahead. Okay, I'm done.
Oh, okay. Just now you mentioned that one question we should keep asking ourselves is, am I aware? Even if we're in committee meetings or just doing our daily activities. And my question was, let's say we're in a meeting, we should be focusing on what the other people are saying or the topic of the meeting. But if you were to ask yourself, am I aware? Then my question would be, what am I supposed to be aware of? And how do I know whether I'm aware or not? I mean, I understand that the object of awareness is not as important as being aware, but I don't really get it.
Okay, you're in a committee meeting, right?
Huh?
You're in a committee meeting.
Yeah, let's
Okay.
say I am.
And you make your presentation.
Mm.
And in your and then someone starts to scathingly criticize you for your presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Uses maybe even abusive language. You idiot, how could you think that? All right? Now, if you're a normal human being like me, you're going to have a reaction.
Yeah.
You know, you put in 6 weeks of work in this project, right? You present it, and this idiot comes along and says, you're an idiot. And so what comes up into the mind is maybe anger or fear, right? Now, if you're not aware of that anger or fear, you're going to start to act it out. This is an extreme. You're going to start to either repress it or vocalize it. If you can be aware of it as it's arising in the midst of that committee meeting, and you can do that, you can do two things at once. Multitasking. Buddhist multitasking. You can be aware of this anger arising, and you can meditate with that as you're engaging and focusing on the discussion. We all do it. Otherwise, we'd be crazy and we'd be stabbing each other. Wouldn't, we would. You notice that. So that noticing of how your reactions are, am I aware? That's why you're asking yourself the question. And if you're not aware, if you're just caught in your resentment to this person, you keep, what's this? What's this like? Even within the discussion, then the chance of you communicating better is much higher. And also, I think to consider is when you interact with life, those things which echo in your mind for 2 days, what's that about? You have some interaction, and then for 2 days you feel regret or remorse, or for 2 days you feel jealousy and resentment for what happened. What's that about? That's non-awareness. That's attachment. I got caught, in some kind of mindset. And you want to be able not to have to carry all that baggage around the rest of your life, for days and days and days. So the more you can be, am I aware, right at the moment when these things come up, and just be very patient with them, there's a chance you have less garbage to deal with when you come home. Because we do pick up a lot of stuff. So am I aware, it's like knowing the whole story, not just the social interaction, but how you're reacting and responding and learning about yourself in all situations. That's what I'm kind of pointing to, huh? And you do it already, otherwise you'd be in the loony bin. If you didn't do this is people who don't have mindfulness just completely get lost in their things. And this is just kind of enhancing that capacity to be aware and to understand yourself in all situations. So it's a second level of consciousness, a kind of inner level. Does that help?
Sort of like.
Come on, give me another one, okay?
No, because I had a question as you were speaking, but I was listening to you speak and I forgot what the question was. I guess like my other question would be, let's say I wasn't feeling angry towards anybody. Let's say I was just sitting there in a meeting listening to somebody speak, and I just asked myself, am I aware? And then I would suddenly lose my concentration on what the person was speaking, as I shifted my consciousness to, or my concentration to whether I was aware or not, or not of what.
I don't find that.
I
I find it actually more focused. Maybe you're different than me.
Or like.
But I just find if I do that, I'm much more engaged with the person. Like, let's say I'm making some judgment about, am I aware? And I'm more open to the person. I'm receptive. I'm available. But whatever language you use, you want to be present to the way things are, right? You agree with that? Yes, okay.
I just remember the question.
Great, okay.
Okay, sorry.
You only get
Because,
3 chances. This is the last one.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely the last one. Sorry, because today was my orientation, so I met a bunch of strangers. And what you said just...
At university, is that it?
No, secondary, high school. JC.
High school. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it means like the first day of school? Is that what you're talking about? Or?
Sort of.
Kind of, okay.
And just now what you said about meeting the gardener or something like that, and realizing that you were focusing on your preconceptions or like what you thought the person was like instead of like just observing the person. I found that quite useful. So I was like, wow. Then I wasn't as fearful of the strangers anymore. So just now you mentioned that awareness. So I just want to ask, is awareness finding the cause of your suffering?
Awareness helps you to see the cause of your suffering. Sustained awareness helps you to see the cause of your suffering. If you don't have sustained awareness, you don't see cause and effect. You just see effects, basically. It's kind of like you're only looking at the symptoms. But if you have sustained awareness, you see the cause. Right? And the things which really fool you, like kind of really throw you off, you have to be more aware of them. How they arise, how they endure, how they work. So that's like sustained awareness.
But is it only to find the cause? Like, is the cause the end? Like, then
Well, if you see the cause, you'll understand how to let go of the cause, hopefully. Because you're an intelligent lady, right?
I hope so.
But that's the idea. When you see the cause, because you don't want to suffer. You want it, we're all made for happiness in some sense, because we don't want to suffer. So when we see the cause of our suffering truly, deeply, then we're going to let go of it because you don't want to suffer. Okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Lungpo. I want to ask the questions on when you're aware of the emotions that arises, you see the change. Like, for example, when you see the angers, you see it arises and it falls. But sometimes when the emotion is very strong, and then my question is more like on the contemplation part. Do you do it as the emotion arises and fall, and then you contemplate on it? Because sometimes what I felt was that when I try to contemplate on it on the spot after it passed away, try to see the cause and actually arising again, like kind of like drawn into it, especially when the emotion is very strong. So how do it like sort of like contemplate it? Is it during the time, or is it after it over and your mind is calm?
It's a kind of study. Like all of us, like one of the basic energies which I've dealt with in my life is fear. I've had a lot of fear. So much of my contemplative life has been a study of fear. It's visceral manifestations, it's thought manifestations, it's energy manifestations, the social manifestations. Like I could be in the woods and see a bear and not be too afraid. We have bears sometimes, right? But I could be terrified of giving a Dhamma talk. And I said, what's that about? They're not going to kill me, and they'll probably feed me tomorrow. But I could be quite afraid. So I began to, it wasn't logical. So that was that was one of the really great sources of suffering for me, was fear. So then my contemplative life became a study of fear, right? And so then I'd see what social situations triggered it. I began to try to get a physical understanding of fear rather than just the particular circumstance which was triggering the fear. So how does fear as a bodily feeling? Where's the tension in the body? What's happening with the breath? So it became a continual observation, refinement of observation around this very primal energy called fear, until I kind of knew all the flavors. I knew vanilla, I knew chocolate, I knew all the flavors of fear. And then as I understood fear as an object, and I understood the attachment to that, then the karma of fear began to wear away, right? And just as an example, say the problem I had with fear was that I was trying to get rid of it. And I wasn't really being aware of it as something changing. I just practiced in order to change it and get rid of it. And that insight took a long time. So then I went back to Four Noble Truths. And fear would come up and say, what's the problem? Fear is the problem, damn it. No, that's not the second noble truth. The second noble truth, the cause of fear is what? It's attachment to desire. Oh, okay, so there's the fear. Oh, I don't want the fear. That's the problem. So what do I have to do? I have to welcome the fear. No way. No, I'm not going to do that. My teacher said, just welcome it. No, no, it's the only way you can do it, Viradhammo. Okay, I'll welcome it. And that was counterintuitive. My intuition said, repress it, get rid of it, do metta, something like that. But it wasn't working because I was just trying to get rid of it. So my metta practice was based on vibhava tanha. I was practicing metta to kill the fear, which doesn't work. Not a good idea. So I began to see, what is metta? Is like welcoming the fear. And then as I welcomed it, it came through bodily and physically and mentally. But I began to know it more and more as something that's changing. It arises and ceases. And then the karma of fear began to dissipate and end and cease. And now I have, I don't have much fear. It comes a little bit. But that was like, it was like a study. It was like you're studying an animal. You're studying beavers or something like that, or fish. And you're looking at it and see what's the attachment and what's the letting go. So the arising of a certain emotion every now and then, that we deal with that in a way. But what are the conditions in your life which really create a strong sense of self, which really occupy your mind and prevent that availability? And that's what you want to look at. And that's very personal. Your karma is different than my karma. But if you just think, why am I always preoccupied with this? Why is my mind always preoccupied with this kind of thinking? What is it? Where is it? How does it work? If you keep doing that, then you're moving towards freedom, because your freedom is your freedom, my freedom is my freedom. In that way. Yeah? But it's a very sort of intelligent and honest investigation. It's not a judgment. You shouldn't be so fearful, Viradhammo. That's not intelligent. That's just hateful. It's understanding yourself, and then understanding yourself through the Four Noble Truths. And that leads to deep peace, because if like for me, fear was such a huge factor. I realized if I can suss fear out, if I can beat this one, that's going to be a big piece of freedom for me, right? So it was kind of like an interesting challenge too, an interesting kind of challenge. Okay? All right. There's go.
Just want to understand when you say you welcome the feeling like for fear or anger. I tend to have the same problem as him, because we've been taught you need to explore and understand, watch it. But the more sometimes when you watch it, it gets worse because it's cyclic, or sometimes when it's over, you just natural tendency that you don't even want to think about it anymore, because the minute you think about it, it's going to come up again. So how do you welcome it? That's the part that I don't quite get.
Well, the welcoming for me came as a consequence of trying to get rid of it. So the welcoming isn't an absolute. Because I noticed that my problem with fear was first of all, it was just a strong energy in me for whatever familial karmic reason, right? So it arose in situations where it wouldn't arise for other monks, right? So it was like just somehow that this is the way this guy's made up. And then my problem was that I was trying to get rid of the fear, so the welcoming was a counterbalance to the fear. If I'm indulging in fear, or let's say I'm indulging in anger, like let's say I say, I hate you. Well, I'm going to really welcome this. I really hate you. That's not coming from cause and effect. That's coming from some idea that someone's told me. So if you go back to the Four Noble Truths and you look at what's the craving? What's the craving right now? But this is the way it is now. Emotionally, mentally, physically, I'm feeling this way now. And if I'm suffering, what is the craving? What do I have now that I don't want? Or what do I don't want that I do have? You're looking at that. And that gives you the key of what you need to do, what kind of practice you need to do. So it's not absolute about welcoming. I only use welcoming when when I'm practicing Vibhavatana, when I'm trying to get rid of. But let's say I wake up in the morning and it's minus 20 outside. Have to go to morning meditation. I'm in my kuti. And very warm duvet. And my fire's gone out in my kuti. So the indoor temperature now is down to 5 degrees. Right? My bell rings at 4 o'clock. My alarm rings. And my first thought is, I love this duvet. And then I welcome that thought. Oh, duvet, come. Then I get up at 7 in the morning. I miss morning meditation. Right? So that's not a good time to welcome. So then I say, no, just get up, Viradhammo. Come on, get up. So I'm putting a different energy because I know the indulgent energy is to get under the duvet, stay for a few more hours. And in a cold climate, there's nothing more beautiful than a warm duvet. No way. So it depends. Like my first teacher in Buddhism, he said, what were the 2 words that the Buddha might have used the most in his life? It depends. So any technique anyone tells you, remember, it's particular to the context that person worked with that stuff. So even if I tell you to welcome fear, you don't believe that. Look at your own mind and say, well, what is the problem with fear? Is it that I'm indulging in it or trying to repress it? What's going on? And then make the efforts that you can. So let's say if there's a person in the monastery and every time I think of them I get angry or annoyed, then it's better not to think about them. Right? So I see that, like my mind, I'm just sitting in meditation, that monk. Then you welcome that monk even more. No. Don't go there. Right? Don't go there. So it depends. So sometimes you don't go there. Sometimes you have to go there because you're trying to get rid of it. So it's a very intelligent kind of contemplation. It's not just a ritual that you do, or it's not just a kind of blind technique. It takes intelligence of watching and seeing cause and effect, seeing result. Huh? And that's why I think the Four Noble Truths are so brilliant, because they're really asking you to look very carefully at suffering and its cause and its ending, right? And that kind of questioning, sometimes it's not so obvious. You struggle with something for days and days or weeks and weeks and weeks. And that struggle is where the insight comes from. And it's very personal, very, very personal. So your question is very apt, and your question too is very important, because your way of working with your mind is your way of working with your mind. And I can only suggest what worked for me, but it was in a particular context with particular factors. Yeah? Yeah? Okay.
Hi. Let's see. Okay, supposing you have a relationship with somebody, you're relating to somebody, and I feel maybe irritated or maybe over something small, and I observe and I see that this is my own defilement, where I am desiring another, I have an expectation or wish for another behavior. So noticing this, and I then don't express anything, and I look at how can I try to let it go and have greater acceptance. So I've been struggling with this for a few months, but I still seem to be at the same spot as a few months ago. What would be a wiser way to approach it, since this trying to say have greater that it's my problem to deal with. So how should I go about to manage this, since you have a relationship? And that's the first one. The other one is, how do we balance? It relates to this one. It relates to this same one. Yes.
I'll lose you.
Okay, sorry. How do we merge this Buddhist approach of trying to manage things instead of expecting change from other people, and balance that with communication in a relationship. If I don't express it, the other party doesn't know. But in expressing this is my own selfish desire, which is no reflection on the goodness of another person or their behavior. How do we, these two, thank you.
Wow. That's a question. Maybe someone who's married could talk about it. No, I'm being facetious. All right. So, as a monk, oh yeah, exactly. So that's where we'll take it. First of all, that as a monastic community, we have certain expectations of behavior from each other. Right? We have a Vinaya, and we have certain guidelines about admonishment. We have certain guidelines about sharing of requisites and all the rest of it. And when a monk goes outside those guidelines, then it is our duty to offer him reflection, to say, I'm sorry, Venerable, we don't do it that way. Right? So I have a social structure which isn't just my own opinion. You know, I didn't like the way you chanted this morning. Right? Which is an opinion. Rather, no, Venerable, you cannot have a bun at 3 p.m. I'm sorry, you cannot do that. So we have an agreed social structure within which we can offer reflection and admonishment to each other, which is not, it gets personal, sure, but it has a framework which is not personal. It's not just about me being in a good or bad mood right now, but it is an agreed way of, like admonishment. We have to ask permission to admonish. We have to check out our own minds before we admonish, and so on and so forth, right? So that helps me contemplate, when I talk with other monks, to say, look at my own mind and look at them and say, and then sometimes I have to say, you can't do that. If I don't say it, you can't do that, the monastery gets really confused, because by Vinaya, you can't do that. So if I forego my responsibilities as a senior monk and not offer criticism and admonishment, that would be wrong. So what do I do when my criticism is correct, but I'm ticked off at the person? You know, not only is my criticism correct, but I hate them. Or, you know, I'd rather they just drop dead, kind of thing. Exaggerate. That's difficult because I'm right. You know, I am right and they are wrong. And that's called righteous indignation. And when I come from that, when I come from righteous indignation, that's all they hear. They don't hear the Vinaya, they hear my hang-ups, my neuroses. And yet, if I don't say something and they continue that behavior, the monastery suffers. So I have a problem. So what do? I wait, and I wait, if I'm skillful, until the ego stuff has abated, and I try to watch the situation and say, no, I am right, that's not correct. And I wait out the annoyance, and when I can admonish someone from non-annoyance, but from what is correct and what is appropriate, then the effect is very good. Very, very good. When I admonish from annoyance and self-righteousness, it's a horror. I regret it, they regret it, and it just does not work. And that's just through life experience, isn't it? Right? So, in a relationship, do you have agreed sets of behavior? I don't know. Are there ways that you've agreed with a partner that it's appropriate to communicate? If there are, and the person is using language which is not appropriate, you can say, you know, we agreed to communicate in a certain way, and that's not right. If you don't have those agreements, it's kind of hard to judge it. But the mistakes I've made in life quite often are admonishing from the wrong place or criticizing from the wrong place. And I found it's much more profitable to try to wear that karma out first, but then still say, no, that's wrong. that's inappropriate. You can't do that. Because that's important too. Otherwise, people just step on you. So Buddhism isn't a doormat philosophy, right? You know, it's not like, oh, I love you, please step on my face. It is about being strong, you know, and forthright in social situations which are incorrect. But it's also about purifying the heart. And we have dilemmas. You know, we have situations where both are right. Both are right. So sometimes you do admonish out of a heavy state of mind, but you just have to do it. And you just say something really strong to the person, and it's emotionally powerful, but you have to do it. It's the only way they're going to listen. And that's okay too, because you don't want to be some kind of a wimp that always, oh yes, please kick me again, you know, because that's unhealthy too. So a kind of a Buddhist. Maybe a Buddhist viewpoint that metta means I allow people to abuse me is wrong understanding. Yeah? I have to be strong and say, no, that's wrong speech. That's wrong. So in work situations or relationship situations, if those boundaries are more clearly defined, like in a work situation in Canada, if you're working for the government and a boss is using language which is incorrect according to government standards, the employee has a chance to address that through legal means, right? It's not just personal. No, you can't do that. You can't do that. But much of life hasn't got those clear definitions and clear boundaries. So it's an interesting thing to explore. If you can explore the person, that kind of communication, then that's a really good relationship, because you're going into areas which are very delicate and difficult and fearful and so on. So the more one can explore that, then there's a kind of health in that, a good health in that. All right? As a monk.
Good evening, Ajahn. Yes. I have a few points to clarify. First of all, when you when you mentioned the question about asking about awareness, were you thinking of sati? Yes. Right. Thank you. And thank you for addressing the looming economic downturn that's going to, affect a lot of people. But having observed one many years earlier, it's quite a good thing, because the attendance at many religious places will shoot up. And after that, when things get better, they'll switch venues to the car showrooms. But I mean, that is totally in line with what you mentioned about anicca. Yes, I missed Ajahn Chah's Memorial Day last week. So could I ask you if you are able to recount some personal experiences of Ajahn Chah's mindfulness? Thank you.
Of his mindfulness, well, he has a very strong presence. So when like Ajahn Chah was the king. He moved around in utter beauty. He wasn't a tall man, but he moved around in this most. He was kind of beautiful to watch. The way he walked, the way he comported himself, the way he ate his food. It was just lovely to be with. And that kind of mindfulness in the ordinary was very inspiring. Never rushed. Always the boss. Always the boss. Always in command. One of the interesting things I found, like we would, he had a wicker bench under his kuti, and there was a terrazzo floor where we would sit and have like satsang, where he would do a Q&A, whoever came. And sometimes monks would be there, and sometimes lay people would come, and it was just lovely to go there and sit and be with him. And sometimes he was silent, and it was interesting watching his personality, because let's say a merchant would come from Ubon and would have a question about family life or whatever, And then Lompo Cha would come alive. He's a very charming, charismatic man. And he'd draw them out with good humor and give him some kind of encouragement and then some Dhamma talk. And it was delightful to see that very present personality in the context of the need of the person in front of him. And then the person would leave, and then he would go empty. There'd be no one there. It was like where's Ajahn Chah gone? His body was still there, but his mind was just empty. And you could sense this deep silence radiating off of him. He didn't have to be a person. And then another monk would come in, and all of a sudden the person would come alive. So I began to see that personality came and went according to context, rather than according to fear or greed or those kinds of things. That his personality wasn't permanent. It arose from compassion, and then not necessarily, then it went back into upekkha. It's very, very interesting to watch, because you kind of take your personality to be some kind of solid artifact that's in the museum of your mind, right? But it's actually not. It just arises in different contexts. So that was interesting. But also, he had great humor. So in the same situation, if I go to that situation, so Ubon, 1974, hot, poor, very hot, very poor, and a merchant comes from Ubon with a case of Pepsis and ice. And my eyes just go, So we're all sitting there, and there's this case of Pepsis and a big bucket of ice. I mean, that was like Nibbana. There's one monk who, I'll call him Venerable A. I'll just, because this is recorded. Now, Venerable A had a passion for sugar. And he would and the only place you could get a sugary drink was with Ajahn Chah. Otherwise, there was nothing. So every now and he would float around Ajahn Chah's kuti to see if there any action. So I'm sitting there with Ajahn Chah. Case of Pepsi's arrived. The bucket of ice is there, and we're all waiting. And we're ready. And Bhikkhu A comes in, right? And he sits down. And he sits and sits. And Ajahn Chah talks or doesn't talk, and he sits and sits. And an hour goes by, and then Bhikkhu A says, oh, well, gets up and leaves. And just as he's out of shot, Lompa says, is he gone? Okay, open up the Pepsis. He had a great sense of humor. I could go on and on. So.
We have time for one more last question.
Please, there's the lady. There's a mic behind you.
Good evening, Lumpo. Just now you mentioned about skillful means. So, Buddha actually addressed, give many teachings to actually, in terms of different aspects of life. And this skillful means, so how do we actually develop skillful means? Because there's a lot of things that's focused on intention. So that is very clear. But the skillful means of delivering, I don't really have a good clarification on that. Would you help to clarify on that?
Well, just take precepts. You undertake the precepts as a training, all right? So undertake the precept to refrain from harming living beings. So that's a training, or a skillful means. So you're sitting in my monastery, and I have a lot of mosquitoes in the summer, not now. And the mosquito lands on your nose or on your shoulder. Precept says, I undertake the precept to refrain from killing mosquitoes. No, it doesn't. No, it says killing big creatures, right? Does a mosquito count? Probably not. No. Right? Unskillful, but mindful, maybe. Maybe, maybe I kill the mosquito, but wait a minute. That's not the deal. The deal isn't I can get rid of the guys I dislike. The deal is I can't kill anything. So even though I might lose the plot, now I'm more aware of my tendency to kill mosquitoes. And that's a good thing. And that's a skillful means. So the next time the mosquito lands on my shoulder, I'd say, okay, I'm going to try to be more patient. So Kanti Barami, the development of the Baramis, right? So I'm patient, and then I kill him again. This is real life, right? And then I say, okay, a little more. I need to practice a bit more. Determination, adhitthana. I become more determined to really notice when a mosquito lands, the intention to kill. I'm going to really notice that. So now the mosquito lands. Now I'm much more aware of my mind. I'm much more aware of the aversion to the displeasure. And now I just, what is displeasure anyway? Is it this bad? They don't have malaria here. And I just watch the feeling of being punctured, the sucking of blood, right? And I watch, and then I hear it fly away. And I've been mindful right through. So the precept helped me, the development of patience helped me, and the adhitthana helped me, right? So very simple. So usually like skillful means is developing an object of meditation to calm the mind. So somehow you've got to stabilize the mind. If your mind's just off all the time, you've got to figure out how to do that. Be in the present moment. Skillful means. Generosity. You become less selfish when you're more generous. Skillful means. As you're more generous, you're more mindful. All the paramitas. That's a very good teaching on skillful means. You're in a situation where it's really boring. Really, like let's say you're meditating. Meditating is very boring, isn't it? No, sometimes. Let's say it's difficult, or a situation is very, very painful, or whatever, and you make the statement to yourself, this is a chance to develop Kanti Barami, right? You've made a statement of training the mind, rather than just enduring. No, this is a chance to develop Kanti Barami, skillful means, right? You're doing it all the time, really. You're doing it all the time. The Buddha just emphasizes certain things which are really helpful on the path, and it's all to make you more mindful, to make you more aware. So in that example of the mosquito biting, all of that made me more mindful of my impulses, my aversion, and then I actually discovered it's not so bad. It's just a little pinprick and an itch, not so bad. So I began to be free of that tendency to want to kill the mosquito. Yeah? That's their problem. That's their problem, not yours. You can keep some of the people happy some of the time. What is that, Bob Dylan song? You can keep some of the people happy some of the time. You keep all the people happy some of the time. You can't keep all the people happy all the time. Bob Dylan, wasn't that? I'm an old 60s guy. But, in terms of relating to people, some people, no matter what you say, they'll feel insulted. So to live your life to try to make people happy and, walk on eggshells is a very fearful life. So you got to say your piece. You got to do your strength, right? But if it's coming from a clear place, you won't have a lot of baggage afterwards. You won't be carrying it. If you come from a difficult place, you'll have the repercussions, the remorse, and so on. If you come from a clear place and the person says, you hurt me, I say, no, you hurt yourself. It's your mind. I was clear, I know. So the more clarity you have, the less people can intimidate you in that way. Intimidate. Yeah? Okay. All right, that was...
Shall we say sadhu 3 times to thank the...